I don't mind at all being called that. I think that we're living in a society that, to a large extent, is pop. I think it's one of the facets of our society, and it's one of the facets of the present society which is new, and one of the facets that hasn't existed before. But it's made, in a way, partially a new landscape for us in the way of billboards and neon signs and all of the stuff that we're very familiar with, and also literature and television, radio, so that almost all of the landscape, all of our environment seems to be made up partially of a desire to sell products. This is the landscape that I'm interested in portraying, and I'm also not only portraying it, but I'm working in the style of it, or a style which at least parodies the style of everyday art and everyday society. I'm interested in portraying a sort of anti-sensibility that pervades the society, and a kind of maybe gross oversimplification. I use that more as style than as actuality. I really don't think that art can be gross and oversimplified and remain art. I mean, it must have subtleties, and it must sort of yield to a kind of aesthetic unity. Otherwise, it's not in the realm of art. It's something else, probably. But I think that using it as a style, I think it gives it a kind of brutality and maybe hostility that is useful to me in an aesthetic way. I don't mean that industrialization is attempting to be hostile. That's not the point. But the aggressiveness is aggressive to the point of hostility, I think. And it's this kind of thing which can, which I think forms or crystallizes into a kind of style. And it's that sort of anti-sensibilities and conceptual appearance of the work that interests me and is my subject matter. The new sensibility that I'm trying to bring to it is apparent anti-sensibility, but it is a new sensibility. I think that's the important part of it. It's probably not so much that it is apparent anti-sensibility, but it's a new sensibility. It's a modern sensibility. Instead, say, of thick and thin paint, which might be the European sensibility, I'm using flat areas of color as opposed to dotted areas, which imitate Ben-Day dots in printing and become an industrialized texture rather than what we're familiar with as a paint texture. So that by juxtaposing two kind of commercial textures together, I'm really involved in a relationship between texture in this instance, as well as color and the other things, but that it's a modern industrial texture, and it's not one that is nostalgic or that refers back to European painting or American painting up to now. I'm rather careful not to get the painting textured or to have it look worked on and rearranged. I try to do it so that it appears as though this was only done once and that I knew exactly what I was going to do right from the start, and it was just sort of a question of filling in the lines. But paintings rarely work out this way and generally take some kind of rearranging. But I sort of work it out almost in a mechanical way to begin with. I think that whatever approach one uses, that he ought to go as far as he can with it in order to make it have as much impact as possible. And I think the one that I've chosen seems to lead toward a kind of brutal and antiseptic quality. So since I'm working in this area, I would try to push that style as far as I can. I have worked in other ways and at any time tried to push the feeling, whatever feeling it was I had, just as far as I could in the painting. Most of the painting that I've done is sort of a matte finish. That's one kind of industrial texture, but I kind of got interested in very glossy surfaces, which would be even more sanitary, I think, and remind one of sort of hospital corridors or lunch counters or whatnot. I've used this Rolex plastic because it has a three-dimensional quality. The surface is reticulated and forms sort of a lens whereby with a change of light or a change of movement, the background will seem to change. And it seemed to lend itself very well to landscapes because it's reminiscent of sky, which would change, but it's also reminiscent of a kind of commercial handling of sky. It might be a way to make a beautiful sky that would stop your eye as you went by a store. So it has a kind of commercial aspect as well as a beautiful one. But it also, plastics themselves being modern materials and associated with industry and so forth, and not reminiscent of past art, I found very sympathetic to my own use, and I've used them pretty much for landscapes. I started to try to do paintings in epoxy paint and had difficulty working with it. The idea occurred to me that I could have them porcelain enameled on steel as the subway signs are made. So I tried to find a factory that would work along with me, and the idea of getting into an industrial process itself was interesting to me. Then from this, we found that we could easily make three-dimensional objects, which I could fabricate in cardboard and make two-dimensional plans on paper, and the factory would execute these. Most of these were explosions, although some were landscapes. Then I got interested in doing things in fully round because these three-dimensional enamels are essentially two-dimensional, and looked for some way of doing my image in ceramic. The idea of doing it in ceramic and in three dimensions was particularly interesting to me because the symbols that I used are used to give three-dimensional effect on a two-dimensional surface. Shadows and lighting that you see in cartooning and in advertisements usually depict the kind of light reflection or shiny surface which tries to make the two-dimensional image look round. Well, let's imagine an ad in which cups and saucers are being advertised, and on the surface of these in the newspaper we have light and shade, which is depicted in either flat black marks or in half-tone dots. And these half-tone dots represent three dimensions. But to put these half-tone dots and these same two-dimensional symbols on an actual three-dimensional surface and to make a cartooned image, the symbols of which seem to be associated, let's say, with a flat working two-dimensional surface, was something that interests me quite a bit. Also, the idea of doing, say, a sculpture of cups and saucers in the same material that cups and saucers are done in other words, ceramic, was another thing which interested me quite a bit. The heads are a little bit of a different problem because the original heads are not in ceramic. It was another, in a sense, excuse for decorating a surface, but a kind of interesting one to me, and one that sometimes get into amusing contradictions between what is two-dimensional and what is three-dimensional. It's very hard to say why I started to do cartooning. I began again in 1960-61 to paint cartoons still involved in a kind of abstract expressionist format of painting, using humorous sort of animated or animal cartoons like Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny and things. The paintings I don't think were successful at all, and I've destroyed most of those paintings. But in '61, got the idea of doing one fairly straight, where the painterliness which had been in my abstract expressionist paintings was no longer part of the painting, and the kind of texture that I would use would be the commercial texture of half-tone dots and flat printed areas. I go through comic books looking for material which seems to hold possibilities for painting, both in its visual impact and in the impact of its written message, which I rarely make up. I don't think I'd be capable of making them up. But I try to take messages which which kind of universal, or in a way either completely meaningless or so involved that they become ludicrous. When I did it, I had no idea that anyone would be interested. In fact, I really felt as though no one in the world would look at these, because they were certainly humorous, and I was serious about them as paintings, but certainly recognized the kind of, recognize how other people would see these works. I know that my work has been accused of looking like the things that I copy, and it certainly does look like the things I copy. And I think a lot of this is that people assume that similar things are identical. But it is that quality, whatever art is, that transforms the work of art to be something different from the subject matter. And I believe I'm transforming this into something else, or at least that I'm forming art. There's no way to prove this.
Earlier, you said casually, since I don't believe in painting anymore.
Well, I don't believe in painting because I hate objects, and I hate to go to museums and see pictures on the wall because they look so important and they don't really mean anything, I think.
People think of you as the perfect pop artist without really knowing what that means, or I think really knowing what your work is about. I'd like to try to talk some more about the paintings and the things you did earlier, because there's something that I think needs to be explained for the public, which has at this point a certain impression of you, and I'm not sure that it's the one that you would want them to have, although I don't think it matters to you very much. Is that true?
What?
Does it matter to you that people feel one way or another to you? I mean, you have a kind of reputation now, which is a little bit apart from what you really are, I think. And does it matter to you that this is so, that they feel one way rather than another about you?
I don't really understand. What do you mean? This is like sitting at the World's Fair, riding one of those Ford machines where the voice is behind you. It's so exciting. You don't have to think anything. But you should just tell me the words and I can just repeat them because I can't. I'm so empty today, I can't think of anything. Why don't you just tell me the words and they'll just come out of my mouth?
No, don't worry about it because we...
No, I think it'd be so nice.
We'll
we'll
loosen up after a while.
Well, no, it's not that. It's just I can't, I have a cold and I can't, think of anything, and it'd be so nice if you told me a sentence. And
let me ask you some questions that you can answer.
Oh, no, but you repeat the answers, too.
All right. Well, I don't know the answers to some of them. Before you started the silkscreen, you made a number of paintings, and you made comic strips, right?
Yes, I made comic strips. Before I did the silkscreen things.
And you made some other paintings of things that were not done mechanically. What were they?
I made, I guess they were ads from magazines.
And then you made...
and then I made...
things like... Andy Warhol's reticence about himself masks a unique sensibility, one which has helped to alter our vision of the contemporary world. He suppresses his own feelings. This comes naturally to him, but also it imposes a detachment which gives his work an objective, almost surgical clarity. In time, he arrived at the silkscreen technique of making his pictures, a method which completely removes his own hand from the paintings. Choosing the images, their scale and shape, he sends them off to be processed photomechanically. Only the choice of color remains. In the factory, as everyone calls his studio, he prints the paintings with the help of his assistant, poet Gerard Malanga. Like Lichtenstein, Warhol takes his images from commercial art and from the popular culture, focusing on the most banal and familiar components of our environment. Warhol's intention is not satirical. With an implacable coolness, he forces our attention on the bizarre inventory of package labels, movie stars, and news photos of disasters, things we never really look at. By blowing up their scale, treating them so mechanically and passively, and often monotonously repeating them within the same painting, he rides over our indifference and our blindness. We have no other choice but to open our eyes anew to the whole world around us. A lot of people might be inclined, it seems to me, to put you down because they could say that your work has a certain distance, it's mechanical, and you don't really make it, and all of those things. And yet, like everyone else, when you start to talk about it, the things you say are about really caring. I mean, you want people's lives to be better.
Yeah, well, I guess I really don't, it's too hard to care, and I guess I care, still care, but I mean, it would be so much nice not to care.
In other words, are you saying that you are involved in this idea of making people more conscious of their lives, but you don't really want to get into their lives deeply? You just want to stir up.
Oh, yes, yeah. Don't want to get too involved.
I think that this is a very important thing about all of your work. I mean, this idea of the distance, your own distance that you keep from it. Is this because of this feeling that you don't want to get that close to it?
Yes, I don't want to get too close to it.
You never, in any of your work, have ever really said anything that tells anyone anything about you, and you don't want that to happen, do you?
Well, there's not very much to say about me.
But there have been some extraordinary things. I think that for me, the high point was the opening of the exhibition at the Institute of Contemporary Art in Philadelphia, when so many people came that they had to take all the pictures down, and thousands of people jammed in there, and there were no pictures to speak of, just you. And you had the real character of a celebrity there. The kind of celebrity we really haven't had in American art. Do you realize that?
Oh, it was so pretty and glamorous.
Well, Andy, do you have any thoughts at all about the fact that so many people like the idea of just being able to watch you sitting in a chair or standing on a balcony signing soup cans?
But that won't last very long.
You don't think so?
No, because just sitting there, it's really doesn't mean anything. But what I really want to do is, I guess, do some movies and sort of take what we've done and combine them together or something like that.
Andy Warhol has turned his attention more and more to movies, and he has become a leader of the underground film movement. He violates all the conventions of filmmaking, and his movies are shown without editing, as they come from the lab. While some run for 8 hours, most of them are short, 3-minute reels, like the 13 Most Beautiful Women. The film you were watching, Nancy Worthington Fish, comes from this series. Superstars, Edie Sedgwick, talks about her impressions of Andy.
Andy has an extraordinary sort of removed self. I mean, he loves to see everything and watch everything, and has all this sort of beautiful imagination, and also very steady, severe vision. Severe in the sense that it's unrelenting. It doesn't change. But it's like ideal, because what he's doing is he just gives back the simplest things to people. And then all of a sudden see what has been in front of them, so forth. He really has a touch for that. And he's genius, his self. I mean, he really is a person. And he's an artist.
When you began, you made the films very simply, without moving the camera and so on, and now you've tended to make them more and more complicated. You're getting into sound now, and what are you trying to do now?
I got tired of just setting the camera because it just meant repeating the same idea over again, so I'm changing, I'm trying to see what else the camera can do. And I'm mostly concerned with doing bad camera work and we're trying to make it so bad, but doing it well. Where the most important thing is happening, you seem to miss it all the time, or show the most scratches you can on the film, or all the dirt you can get on the film, or zoom badly, where you zoom and you hit the most important, you miss the most important thing, and your camera jiggles so that everybody knows you're watching a film. Because everybody else can do, I don't know, it's so easy to do movies, and you can just shoot and every picture really comes out right. So that's what I'm working on right now.
I want to change the subject again, and I would like to ask you to say something about the new sculpture.
The new things. Well, I'm working on a sculpture because since I didn't want to paint anymore, and I thought that I could give that up and do the movies, and then I thought, well, there must be a way that I have to finish it off, and I thought the only way is to make a painting that floats, and I asked Billy Kluver to help me make a painting that floats, and he thought about it, and he came up with the silver. Since he knew I like silver, he thought of the silver things that I'm working on now, and the idea is to fill them with helium and let them out your window, and they'll float away, and that's one less object to have around. And it's the it's the way of finishing our painting, and
So you think that that this will finish off painting, and then
well, for me, yes.
for you. So you feel that instead of having a painting, which is an inert object hanging on the wall, that what we really need is to have things which involve people more directly. And
we started we're sponsoring a new band. It's called the Velvet Underground, and we're trying to. Since I don't really believe in painting anymore, I thought it would be a nice way of combining, and we have this chance to combine music and art and films all together, and we're sort of working on that, and well, the whole thing is being auditioned tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and if it works out, it might be very glamorous.
what sort of thing do you intend to do with the band? Could you talk about that?
Well, it would be the biggest discotheque in the world, and it will have 21 screens, and I don't know, 3 or 4 bands.